Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming out on this beautiful Sunday day until it starts storming again. We are here today to listen to Larry talk about the early history of the first Putnam County Hospital. This is part of our recurring Tiny Towns and Vanished Villages talk series that we have on the first Thursday of each month at 6 p.m. Of course, Larry covers a variety of other topics rather than just some of those vanished settlements, but yeah, tonight is going to be a really exciting topic. So I'd like to introduce Larry Tippin, our county historian.
Well, thank you, Rachel. We normally talk about small towns, tiny towns and villages, but getting a few other things. And the first county hospital, to me, the story about how it came about, and we've got a couple of people here close to Showcheck the hospital, not for me to see. I'll talk about him in here a little bit. So they're very good big house of stuff that she brought in, and her mother was one of the nurses in the family's 40s, somewhere in there, right? There's something on? There's something on, yeah. She was a long time. So it's great to have them. So it started out, so let's talk about how this came about and what's going on. So the first 100 years of our county, we didn't have a county hospital. We just had most of our healthcare at home. Doctors made house calls, or sometimes they had an office in our home, like we have here. This is Dr. Irwin's home in Rochdale, still standing at Sarita Preview, just south of the post office. And on the right, you see an entrance that goes into the main area of the home. But on the left here, there's a door that goes straight into a big room that had the door to the residence. And that all certainly was his office, his examiner room. And sometimes you had situations like this. This is from what's called the Kurtz maps from the Putnam County Library. This was just after the turn of the century. You could see courthouse, and then down here where the Masonic Lodge is now, and across from that you see Dr. Bentz's office. A lot of you know Dr. Bentz. You knew Dr. Bentz, knew of Dr. Bentz, and his nephew, Dr. Hutchison. And their office is right next to the house. It's a small office there. We'll talk about both of those two gentlemen. So the early 1800s, a group of ladies, some of whom were wives of the doctors, wanted construction of a county hospital to serve all the needs of all the residents of the county. They're organized at the Putnam Hospital Association. It's in 1907. I love looking at those newspaper articles because it's so neat. It said, live an article about 1907 about the Hospital Association and what they're about, what they're trying to do. Little gathering of women, so forth, so on, about the need for a hospital and some things they want to do to make it happen. And then they met in the assembly room of the new courthouse, which was brand new at the time, adopted the name Putnam County Hospital Association from the previous name, the Putnam Hospital Association. And then also in 1907, Dr. Vince offered the use of his office for the hospital. And the Hospital Association felt, no, it's not good enough condition. That's not what we're for. Thank you, but we're going to do something different. And then do this because they assigned 25 captains of the group, and each of them had an area that those folks just was it funds for. And you could see some of these names. You can recognize some of these doctors. See Missy Vance, Mrs. Dr. Vance, Mrs. Dr. Stevenson, and Mr. John Vance, Miss Lewis Daring, and so forth and so on. And some of these were wives of the doctors. In the picture that's there. take a picture. A lot of names. And you can see Mrs. Charles Burdew. Yes. So, but see, Snake, how you recognize Charles Burdew?
That's my great great grandmother.
Yeah. Alrighty. You want that?
And James Bridges, that's my dad's brother.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a prominent. And why is it the doctors? 1907 still, the hospital movement gathering steam. They're going to add a few new names to the rules. And they get Mrs. Silas Hayes, Mrs. Clint Darren, and a few others. Just put these names out here because these were in the article. And then they do fundraising. So during rubbers sales, for instance, at the South Bermuda Central National Bank, where they raised about $25 or so. It's quite a bit of money in that kilo 7. This is one of the most interesting fundraising things they did. So there's a baseball game going to be held between the Red Men and the Masons at McKean Field in Greencastle. And the Masons have how would you call it? Will be urban, a ringer probably out of place. And his instructions were to strike the sign out 1, 2, 3 every inning. That's his instructions. So I had to find out about this ball game. I looked up paper and it was rained down. But I let kid leave it like that. So I looked the next week and found they did have a game. So it'd been 1907, and it was an exciting day. So the Masons did have a lead until the Red Men scored 5 runs in the bottom of the 8th to win the game. Said that the horses, carriages, it was packed, everything else. And most importantly, they raised $100 for the hospital. And this McKean Field, okay, I'd never heard of this before. So I gotta figure out what's going on. So I found out that it was on the west end of Hannah Street, named after W.R. McKean, who was the president of Vandalia Railroad. And then in 1921, Ira and Mary Blackstock gave $25,000 to expand McKean Field. And of course, they renamed it Blackstock. So that's the history of McKean Field. Like, I always have to share this, right? Can't help it. So they filed corporation papers, Association of 1908. No capital stock, and here's their incorporators. They have, again, some of the names we've been filling out. Mrs. Dr. Hutchison, and just a few more. This is Ed Lynch. Here's the story about the Gillespie Lynch house, and it's Lynch from that. And then there's a picture of it down here. That's got 4 boys on a horse. And one of her photos, those cargo paintings down there. Those 4 boys are the sons of Ed Lynch, whose mother was Mrs. Gillespie. And then we see that they required some property, a name of the Hospital Association, commercial lots, and the avenues. But if that was an investment, it didn't work out very well because we see years later it's up for tax sale. So it didn't work out apparently. Didn't know really the circumstances, but. And then Lee Sinclair was staying offered his property, which is in the junction of Bloomington Depot Streets on the south side, formerly known as the Thomas Van Cleve Place, for the hospital. And at the same meeting, the elected officers, Mrs. Mays, and she's been elected officer a number of times. And then now they're talking about purposing the home of Mrs. Hybert for $6,500, saying the Sinclair deal is not going to work out. One thing, he wanted to name the Sinclair Hospital. They didn't want to name Putnam County Hospital. And it wasn't really big enough for what they needed. And then they're having fairs, courthouse, again, more fundraisers, more bake sale type things. Mrs. Mays reelected president again. She was many years, trying to do a good job. But the most important thing is they've got $1,300 in the bank now, which is a lot of money. There's that. So they continued the fundraising until 1917. In 1917, everything changed. A bill was prepared and presented in the legislature by Andrew Durham. But even know who Andrew Durham was when he was running state senate. The bill passed. New law was enacted for formal procedures for the voters in any county of the state to petition the county commissioner for an election to be taxed for a hospital. So leave it for the voters to decide if they want to be taxed for a hospital. And that 1917 law is part to carry forward into today's law. This is the current hospital law, where the county can establish a hospital and so forth and so on, the methodologies to do so, and how they can get the money. And it's referred to as the 1917 Putnam County Hospital Law. Started right here in Putnam County. There was hospital law before 1917, but 17 was where the voters can decide themselves if they want to be taxed for the purpose of building a hospital. And some of the provisions are exactly like they were in 1970, haven't changed a bit in over 100 years. So shortly after passage of this act, Dr. Gillespie filed a petition with himself and 524 other voters for election for the purpose of deciding if the voters wanted to tax themselves for a hospital somewhere near Greencastle. They had a special election in 1919, and this was the only question on the ballot. I went to do it right away. So September 30th, 1919, they had the election, and we now see where I'm pointing that now they're talking a cost of $75,000, because that'd be $1 million or more today, probably $2 or $3 million. And then the day of elections, they're reporting the voting slow. It's the only thing on ballot, special election. And they're saying the tax is not going to be that great, and they think it's going to pass. And from this, the residents, the voters are in Greencastle are overwhelmingly for it, but they think it's still. But it did not. The townships further away voted it down, basically. And then only about 30% of the voters total showed up. And they lost by 320 vote margin, which is pretty substantial. And then of the votes in North Jackson, which is where I live, up by Barnard and Rayville, only one of the 72 votes is in favor of this. And about the same thing in Floyd South, which starts a mile south of the Fillmore and goes about to Hers Way. So the rural communities, this rural modeling against it. So the Hospital Association gathered petitions and updated just tried in 1920. Let's get it on the ballot as a question in the 1920 election. But first, they canvassed the voters, determined what the issues were, why so many were not in favor. And many felt a new hospital was an effort to cause doctors to benefit themselves. And then they would have to travel great distances. So we're talking 1919, 1920. It wasn't easy to get from the corner of the county downtown. It would take a perfect day. And if you need immediate care, you could go to one of your local doctors. And then, then that was noted that we've got a lot of doctors in Russellville, Ridgedale, Cloverdale, Putnamville, and they didn't think the tax would justify the cost for them or what they perceived to be nominal benefit. Benefit Association and those for the hospital made a significant effort to persuade those against the new hospital the tax rate be minimal as 2 cents. 2 cents on $100 the such valuation. For a typical homeowner would pay about a dime a year. That's it. And then they needed to select a site, draw architectural drawings so they could see what it looked like, and then express the benefits of the new technologies such as x-ray equipment. So 1920, I thought that was kind of odd. I didn't really think too much about x-ray equipment back then, but I did some research and found out, they started the first, what they call, I guess, radiographs in Europe in the late 1890s. And then it spread to the East Coast hospitals, Boston General, and so forth, in the early 1800s. So x-rays still cutting edge, but it's something that's attainable in 1920. And of course, the doctors themselves and their offices could not afford anything like this. They couldn't do that. So benefit of having a central hospital. And a board of trustees was selected to make it more real, like we're really going somewhere now. And then they've got people, prominent people from all over the county, Rochdale, Coverdale, Greencastle, and so forth. And then the northwest corner, Northwood, the selected location, given by the Northwood Development Company. We've got a picture of that for a minute. And then drawings were submitted to the newly appointed board of trustees of the hospital by a firm in Indianapolis, like a real architect firm. And then we'll see in August 1920, the board's meeting, and then looking at preliminary drawings and so forth. And then as election time's coming up, it's getting closer and closer to the election, and there's more sentiment growing for the hospital. And then a new petition was filed to get the question on the ballot in the 1920 election. And then it was noted, as I said, 2 cents on $100 such valuations. I also pointed out that the physician said, no, we don't want to benefit ourselves. We just want the best care we can for our patients. In 1920, so if we gets the vote for the first time in 1920, you guys know, nobody's voting for the first time in 1920 now. The women are. And the women are the one behind this whole thing, right? So it wins. So it carries election. And it's still not by an overwhelming majority. The townships are further away are still talking about 15 to 20% no, or 15 to 20% yes, I'm sorry. The ones further away. But it did carry. But not by a lot. But now we still got to furnish the building. And some groups step forward, like the Red Men. They want to furnish a room in the new hospital. Hospital boards were organized December 1920, month after election. So not messing around about it. Andrew Hammer Greencastle selected president, Dave Bossler, Brucedale, secretary, Justin Corey, William Craig, Greencastle, other 2 members. They drew lots inside the length of the terms. So staggered terms, 1 year, 2 years, so forth. And they drew straw. And then they asked the county attorney to come explain the process about getting this done, letting the bonds, and so forth. And by then, the cost has grown to $95,000. And they thought they could issue bonds for 20 years, 5% interest. And then in August 1921, they issued the bond. Basically, let the county banks issue the bonds, is what they did. And then there's other groups doing fundraising. The American Legion Auxiliary want to equip award in the hospital for disabled war heroes, 1922. So we just have World War I. We've got some disabled people. And they're selling poppies. So significance to the poppies or the Flanders Fields. The Flanders Fields. One of the most significant poems written by Canadian corporal named John McCrae in Flanders Fields in Belgium in World War One. To signify the loss and the sacrifice of these people, talk about the poppies grow row by row, and so forth and so on. Take our prayer with the foe, and so forth. It's just a small part of the poem, this long poem. But it always interests me. I'd like to share about the poppies in Flanders Field. And then, February 1922, they're going to solicit bids to the hospital. So this is getting pretty real. But March 1922, they're going to let the bids today. And the paper reported that George Price Logansport won the bid of $65,000 as a general contractor. Plumbing went to Day and Heat for just over $4,000. Heating to Torelli, I guess, Indianapolis. And the total bids of $76,000 were significantly less than $95,000. But they still need to buy the extra equipment, and so forth and so on. So April of 1922, it started work. They didn't mess around. April of 1922. By July of 1923, they're about basically got. July 11th, they're saying they've got it about done. And then they're having open house for the public for the new hospital, which is now completed, July of 1923. It's going to be held July 30th. And then this really wonderful newspaper article on that day said the hospital has 43 beds. The main floor utilized the office, reception room, medical room, so forth, nurses, or the one room, X-ray room. I remember that. I mean, I was born in this hospital, and I spent time in the X-ray room. I got to visit these peoples. We got to know some of them on a first-name basis. Here, Doc. I guess I was pretty active in there. And the boiler room, so forth, the main floor, the nurses' quartered, and they're promised a new building on the west side across from the hospital within a year. The second floor, they have a number of private beds, a 3-bed ward, kitchen, service room, shower, so forth, so on. 2 rooms on the second floor, private baths, furnished with steel beds and walnut dressers, chairs. And the aim was emphasis on the west side on the second floor because of the lay of land there. So they actually come in the second floor on the west side. Then the third floor, they have the operating room and the nursery and the OB, that kind of thing. And then hospital staff consisted of Miss Eva Milburn of Lebanon, who is superintendent, Miss Effie Stiebelman, who is assistant superintendent, and so forth and so on. And then they had one person who's in charge of the X-ray department. And here it is. In the middle of nowhere, there's one house. So this is taken across Kildee on the hill, as long as they're now. But they did a pretty nice panoramic of the hospital. And this is by the Unfolic at the county library. If you want, we'll see a copy of this picture. That's one house, middle of nowhere. I didn't do it here, but if you zoom in, you can see the cars or Model T type cars and so forth. Pretty cool.
Was that ambulance entrance on front of the building?
This is the drop that faces east.
Oh, okay, about back it up.
So this photo is looking west, and they're showing the east side of the building. August 1st was the first day. They have 2 patients. They're waiting. Can't wait to get in there. Should operation do. The first one was Miss Maud Bias Beaver, lived in Mount Meridian. Had its first operation in the hospital, performed by Dr. Lemon of Crispo. And the first patient, first surgery, was also one of the first deaths. She died in the hospital August 22nd, just a few weeks later. Also on the first day, Mrs. Lowell Broadstreet of Cloverdale had some sort of a surgery. I did follow up on that. She lived a few months until November of that same year. Then cases, Tulsa rule. So we've got a, can't remember which doctor it was, a case of it. One case here of the old medical equipment. I think Dr. Irwin ended up with it. Was it, which doctor had that? But anyway, they had a Tulsa pole. So you could see how, can't even imagine. And then this is interesting. So a young woman in Clinton Township fell from a horse. And there are these hardy rural people, of course. Let's see if it heals itself. Human body is a wonderful thing. It's probably swollen. Couldn't tell what is in the injury. So let's just see if it heals itself. Well, in about a month, it did not. So they brought in and looked at this brand new x-ray equipment and found out that she had a severely broken arm, reform, but it had been so long they had to take her to Indianapolis to a specialist to get it healed. Had they gone in right away and did the x-ray, they would have avoided that, but it just needed the use extra right away. And first baby came in October, so several months later before we had the first one. Love this photo. Where that's on you about there with all the babies. 1920, I guess it was 29 or 27. It was 29. It's kind of bittery. 29. I think some of you have seen this photo. And then in the back on the left was Miss Ida Melbourne, the superintendent. I understand she ran a pretty tight ship. And looking at her, I don't think we could argue with it. Right? A very imposing looking woman, but I'm sure she was a sweetheart. But they say she did a good job. And then just an article in the early days of the hospital about some of the physicians are there for a talk and so forth. I'm only throwing this out here to show you some of the physicians that attended. Some that were you talking. Dr. Collins, I said Dr. Collins is the one that donated equipment that we're talking about. And Strobe of Rochdale, Upper Lehman, Clinton Zario, and so forth, so on. Dr. Benz, some of the common doctors. All right, the nursing home. So after successfully meeting the need of the residents for over a decade, it was noted that the nurses' home, which had been promised, has not yet been built. So Dr. Hutchison, and his wife is one of the three sisters that built Asbury Towers in 1964.
Wow.
You ever heard that story? The three sisters. And they built this building with their own money, $20,000. No more than they got started with the building, they had some problems. But some union men from Terre Haute showed up, went to Dr. Hutchison's office. Dr. Hutchison was a nephew of Dr. Benz, and threatened it. Well, he didn't appreciate that very much. Sent the workers home and had all the materials moved from the site. The workers said that these quote-unquote union men, they were not associated with the local labor force at all. It's right off the impression they're delighted to have work. So the sheriff goes to the county council, has additional appropriation for a deputy to be on site while they're working on the building. And they finished it in short order. So the outside is done by June of 1937, according to the newspaper article. Another article points out. This is like 1941 article that noted that it opened in October 1907. Open.
I don't need a comment at this point. My mother graduated from IU School of Nursing in 1937. She was hired by one of the doctors before she graduated to work at the hospital. This is odd. She graduated in 1937. She lived there. And her brother was one of the first nurses to live in that building. Awesome.
You got to take care of those. You got to take care of those. You really place still exists to work.
It looks exactly.
Sure, it's Richard Ringlet. So that's it. This is a recent picture of it, and it's now a apartment building, but it still says Coach's Nursing Home, Nurses Home, not nursing home, Nurses Home, on the main campus on the east side, and that's still there. So I think that's a neat story. And then in 1939, they had a small addition and upgraded the heating system and so on. They talk about these two projects as if they were one, but they really weren't. Dr. Hutchinson stepped in and his wife and built the nurses' home. And this was the WPA project to expand the hospital. So, of course, all the red tape, it took a couple years longer. And then they opened a wing, 1939. A picture of the emergency room. And this is one of the funeral home. Because I don't know if you know this, but the funeral home directors, to make a little extra money, were basically the ambulance drivers. And some of you up in those days, it's the 70s, the inspiration light. Those 70s, they decided not to do that anymore. They said you can't do that. They imagine having an injury and waking up in an ambulance speeding or the hospital wondering if where you're really going, right? I just thought that was kind of interesting, the virus. But then 1957, they need another edition, and they keep growing. And it's going to cost now a little over $500,000. And that's not a good photo, but 1958. They had the hospital wing. Then it's not a good photo, but I remember it's on the south side of it, not east. And then this photo, comes to Dr. Macy. Apologize, it's not the best photo. I was trying to find a better one, but I couldn't. So Dr. Macy, our Dr. Macy, he is president of our museum board for a number of years. Delivered the last baby in the old hospital and the first baby in the new one. March 4th of 1979, and then March 6th, 1979. One point Dr. Macy photo. Glad to see this. Very impressed. Love this photo. This is a photo of physicians. I'm almost certain it's an old trail lamp. If anybody has something they added, they don't think so, but I'm almost certain that Tark's is old trail lamp. Dr. Mason, are you going to say something?
I think it's Dr. Earth's home.
Who's home?
Dr. Earth's.
Oh, is it?
I believe so.
Okay. So I don't know. I'm just guessing. I never was in the old trail lamp, so I've seen pictures of it.
So you think it's his home? Because they used to have gatherings monthly. Different doctors' homes. So we have some later pictures. They're from that same fireplace.
And we know about what's in it took for soaking. And we had Jinsey Bangan help us identify some of these. On the left is Dr. Hutchins himself, the one that built it in St. Paul. He died in 1951, I believe. So we think this picture is about 1950-ish. And then Jinsey helped identify some of these jumped out too. Dr. Nichols, of course, Brand Nichols. You had Dr. Hutchinson behind him. Indy didn't know who it was. And then Dr. Gibray. And then Dr. Hutchinson. And then Dr. Tipton, of course. And Sarah has an interesting thing back here. I want to say about Dr. Tipton. And then Dr. Aper, Gert Barber, Amy Jane Johnson, D. Earl Weissman, and Cloud Schaubacher, who were the surgeons who both did work on me. I had a thumb that was partly ripped off in a farm accident and Dr. Shy Library. So did back on. And then it put the bone in together with a piece of number on wire. Literally a piece of number on wire. So we got ready to take stitches out, unfold a kit, and put pliers in it. So I could have done that. Pulled it. He said, "Don't yell so much." Anyways, I could shop record. You know it, you know what I'm talking about. And then it went a little further, and then a few more. They think maybe Dr. Beats at Bainbridge, although I don't think so. In the back, Dr. Fuses, Dr. Canis, Dr. Dick Steele, Frederick D. Hopp was supposed to be one of the processing physicians, did not in the picture, did you thought? Because they didn't have that many. Somebody's got to be, you're right. They were talking interesting story about World War II when Dr. Tipton and some of the other doctors went to war. They let Dr. Hutchison to do all the nurses, the medical care, and he was the only one. And they talked about how he would fall asleep standing up, sewing people. Just can't even imagine. He worked 20 hours a day, and then he did all hospitals too, and everything. So, gosh, I can't imagine. Picture of the building, we saw a photo. If you zoom in on it, it says that's Putnam County Hospital. And then this is a photo I have of Dr. Vince, just the show part of it. So, when you guys want to add anything that's familiar with this hospital, you want it?
Yep. So I live in the building next to the nurses' quarters, and I was told I moved here 25 years ago to Greencastle, and so I do some work over in the old hospital now, but my building I was told was the boiler room. Now, are you familiar with that? It sits right next to the nurse court, and the original man, the contractor that turned us all into apartments, he had told me that from the building I was in boiler room, the pipes all ran underground and forced the steam beat to the hospital and the nurse supports. Do you know anything about that?
Not really. And that is probably because I know that's the boiler was built 1939, not long after the nurses' quarters.
So that's the building I live in.
So that would make sense.
And in the main hospital, in the old hospital, I'd poke around sometimes, be a nosy bit, which I can, but there's a room in there, which is a storage room, and it got this closet with drawers, and it must have been the pharmacy, because in these drawers, there's labelable tags, the original tags. This is like aspirin, gauze. It's kind of neat. They never mess with cow.
That was, like the wedding and the reception area, not the highlight magazines for kids. But that's kind of stands out.
Yeah. Like I said, I've been stuck without the old hospital nurse report. I'd never put in about the building I'm in, which is pretty much said that it's only got 3 apartments. The big one, I think that's like 3, something like that.
Yeah, I've not been in it since it closed Pittsburgh Hospital. I have 2 daughters. One was born there, 1975. Another was born 1980 in the new hospital. So probably about last time I was there. What else? That's Easter. Lots of people do it back. Now well like this. Maybe I went out. Dr. Macy, you have any interesting stories to tell about this? Anything you seen that was
No, I mean, that was still the hospital during the blizzard. So there were a lot of stories that came out of the blizzard.
Yeah, you will talk, right? Can you imagine? That's all I got. I mean, Sarah's got some pictures she'd like to share with this being might be interesting. Let's see back here. Oh, I think that's all I got.
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
So in 100 years, do you think people are going to be giving speeches about the courthouse annex? And
No, we might have it done 100 years. If we would have done it 10 years ago when it was like cheap $8. What is it up to now? 60 million?
60 exceeds.
This is Kimzo C4. And then like one of the most recent boats that looked like it moved down, but now they're talking about again. So how long did I talk about this courthouse? Man, history. I mean, I don't know. They're coming down. There was a story about courthouses. I would read that sometime. So next time, I'm thinking about talking about some of the early roads, how some of the roads in Putnam County came about, and how they came about, and the conditions for them. I can get it together. That's going to be my topic next month. I think it'd be my wife did that. She couldn't be here today. She was show so she'd always come to it, but she mentioned that. I thought, yeah, let's just do that.
So tell me again, when did the new hospital open? When did the old hospital cease to?
It was in 1979.
So you were talking about before 3078, which is here.
We got a little show, y'all. I still sent me out March 1890. Yeah. So the last baby was born in March 4, 1979, in the old hospital, and the first one in the new hospital, March 6. So Dr. mentioned they just cut it off right there. You were delivering babies in both hospitals, were you? I mean, when that was it, right? So I would say March 5th was common the last day of 1979. That'd be my guess.
I'll give one hospital story about the blizzard, and you were talking about Dr. Scholacher, surgeon.
Got right.
I had a patient come in during the blizzard in labor, and she delivered a babe, and the baby had a defect in the abdominal wall, so all the intestines were outside the body. And it was a condition that I had heard of, but I had never seen before. And I knew that you were supposed to just keep them warm and moist, get them warmer, get cows over until the proper procedure the med center did was they put something called a silo on, and they slowly push it back in so that it wouldn't shut off the lungs. And so I called and hi you, and they said, just keep doing what you're doing so we can get down there and get the baby. Well, I also had a 4-wheel drive, so I was taking nurses and doctors back and forth to the hospital. And that morning I picked up Dr. Scholacher and brought him in. I was telling him about this. I went out to get another load of people. I came back and my baby wasn't in the nursery.
Oh.
And he said, no, Dr. Scholacher took the baby to surgery. So he took the baby down, put the intestines back in, sewed the abdominal wall back up. And I called IU and I said, you can't do that. He said, the baby won't be able to breathe because that will compress the lung. Right. Well, the baby looked fine. I said, baby looks great. And the baby's still walking around Greencastle today. So Dr. Scholacher was...
Well, Dr. Scholacher, of course, I was saying this, he was kind of work around it. He's a good surgeon, I understand.
Yeah, he's a very
Dr. White, too, of course. Yeah, I understand they look pretty good. And they work again, they both worked on me on various things.
Dr. Lett was there at the same time.
Dr. Lett, I remember Dr. Lett. Remember when he made Florida,
Tennessee or somewhere
similar to him. So I remember that's when that happened. I never had any relationship with him. I knew I've been in Florida, especially. But we're so good to have a small community like ours of such good physicians, good nurses.
Yes.
So
Karen.
Really good nurses. Yeah, both. Yeah, they're good.
Man, I also think I had like that. So that's all talk to nurses. I've always had, and I married a nurse, registered nurse. So I've been kind of the nurses. And I know the times that I'd had procedures. I mean, they're online, the first line to contact, and they're the ones that you hear after the nurse. Yeah. No, in the house. Like that. Not quite an hour here, so it was an next weekend. What could you?
Said maybe I'd drain out that long. No. I just brought some pictures with me of my mother's tenure when she was at the Putnam County Hospital and some of the nurses and doctors that worked there, and just a little bit of information from when she was employed there.
Where is check it out?
You know, go if you're willing, I'll share it with you real quick.
So, thank you. Thank you so